Welcome to Forbes Newsroom. Joining me now is Scott Mendelson, a Forbes entertainment analyst and box office pundit. Scott, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Of course. So, we had a long holiday weekend, which meant more time to go to the movies. What were the big box office winners and losers this Labor Day?
Well, as the prophecy foretold, Top Gun Maverick ended the summer by being the top movie of the long Labor Day weekend with approximately $7.6 million, he says before looking. This isn't the weekend. This is the daily chart. That's not going to help me. 6 million over the Friday to Sunday and a little over 7 million overall. Coming in ahead of Bullet Train with 5.8 million and Spider-Man No Way Home, which was earned a pretty decent 5.4 million over the Friday, Sunday, six and change over the long holiday weekend. It did not take it, despite it did top the Friday box office, but it was understandably front loaded. That being said, it's the biggest grossing Hollywood, anyway, in North America, re-release for a major film in almost a decade.
And what was the point of the re release? Because Spider Man No Way Home only came out 8 months ago.
I think Sony was just filling a vacuum, trying to get a few extra bucks out of their already successful cash cow. Um, I mean, it's not quite the same thing when they put, Morbius back in theaters in early June, almost as a joke. But it's the same situation where there's nothing new nothing big new coming out. So why not throw last year's biggest movie into theaters again with a few deleted scenes and see what happens?
There's no movies coming out. There's about 50% less movies than in 2019, right?
Yes, and that's the definitive problem facing movie theaters right now. The only reason we didn't have a catastrophic drop from summer 2019 is because Top Gun Maverick so aggressively overperformed. I mean, if it had done like 150 million domestic, that would have been great for a non-Mission Impossible Tom Cruise picture.
Mhm.
But it also would have meant that, just because of that, the overall box office for the summer would have been down around 45%. Maybe closer to 40%. But because Top Gun Maverick passed 700 million and it's still going strong, the overall box office for this summer domestically was down closer to 20%, which isn't bad. But it also means that if we had a full-fledged theatrical schedule, it stands to reason that theatrical business would be on par with pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah,
So
we
the
can't.
problem isn't demand, it's supply.
People do want to go to the movies, then you're saying. So why is the supply not there?
Well, unfortunately, it's a multitude of concurrent factors. And, part of it is there were a handful of films that got delayed because of COVID related post production delays. There is a bottleneck because things shut down for a while. Black Adam was supposed to come out in late July. It got moved to October 21st. Salem's Lot was supposed to come out this weekend. It's been moved to be determined. Puss in Boots was supposed to come out in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was supposed to come out in September. That's been moved to Christmas weekend, I believe. And Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was supposed to come out in early October. That's been pushed to next summer. Um, the other situation is that Disney now owns what used to be Fox. Now it's called 20th Century Studios and Searchlight Studios instead of Fox Searchlight or Searchlight Pictures. And they have not been super aggressive in terms of theatrical releases. There are a lot of films from formerly Fox, 20th Century, and Searchlight that 3-4 years ago would have been theatrical releases. Films like Prey, films like The Princess, films like oh God, I just forgot the name of it. Oh no, Not Okay. And the film whose name I forgot, it's an Emma Thompson picture. It's very good. It's about an older woman who hires a male escort to catch up on 60 years of sexual repression. Um, those films premiered on Hulu instead. And while, for example, Prey was very successful by Hulu standards, that's still a film that might have given theaters a little bit of a boost. It's very good. It got good reviews. It got excellent buzz. And because, quite frankly, because we have, I would argue, a year and a half's worth of evidence arguing that films that perform well in theaters do better on streaming than just theatrical premiere or just streaming premieres. And that even films that do poorly in theaters, like Lightyear, for example, do better or do best case scenario streaming numbers than just streaming pictures, then I'm of the opinion that you just roll the dice and spend whatever you need to spend in terms of marketing to get those films into theaters, knowing that at worst, the theatrical campaign and the awareness and media attention and publicity that that creates will make that film more valuable in the streaming afterlife.
And over the weekend, we saw that theaters around the country participated in National Cinema Day, meaning tickets were only $3 at the participating theaters. Did this help the box office at all?
Yes and no. I mean, tickets were $3, so but the good news is that around 8.1 million people bought tickets to the movies on Saturday, this past Saturday. That's a huge upswing from general expectations. So what that implies is that the theater price, because ticket prices have risen with inflation, is a hindrance to audiences who would otherwise be interested in going to the movies. Now, that's not me saying, oh, theater tickets should just, movie theaters should put everything at $5 a pop and watch the profits roll in. But I do think this may signal that there needs to be some kind of conversation to be had about maybe making tickets more affordable, with the caveat that you'll make up for it in concession sales, which is where most of the profit margin for theaters come from anyway. For example, right now, under normal circumstances, it would cost anywhere from $50 to $100 to take a family of 5 to see DC Super Pets or Minions: The Rise of Gru. That's not as much of a value proposition as it used to be in the pre-streaming era. However, if you can arrange it so those tickets only cost $25, and that family of 5 feels comfortable spending that money to go to theaters, they'll probably make up for it in concession sales. Because, spoiler, it's really hard to tell a kid they can't have snacks at the movies.
Yeah, that's true. So they'll feel less guilty with the giant popcorn, the candy, the soda.
Yes. And that's what we've seen with Movie Pass, which may have been a disaster for shareholders, but it worked as intended for consumers. It boosted the ticket sales for movies overall, and more importantly, non-event movies, the ones that people used to see more often when they went to the movies just to go to the movies. If the ticket price is not a factor with Movie Pass or AMC A-List or Regal Unlimited, or I think it's called the Cinemark Movie Club, all the chains have some kind of subscription service now. Pretty much all of them do. And the details all vary. But when you remove the ticket price from the equation, even if it's just psychological, people are more willing to take a chance on a less surefire picture. And by that, I mean, just a movie like something like Beast or The Invitation or Where the Crawdads Sing, something that isn't a $200 million fantasy franchise action picture.
Because you won't feel like it's breaking the bank going if it's at a lower price.
And if you haven't paid for the ticket price, you're more likely to spend that $10 on popcorn and soda, which is, theaters will make more of a profit from that anyway. And again, I'm throwing out random ideas here, but I've felt for years that, especially for family films, for the reasons that we just discussed, there should be some way to, you pay full price for your ticket for a family movie, but you can get that ticket almost entirely compensated in concession sales. So your ticket costs $10 to Minions for your kid, but if you spend $10 on concessions, you get that back.
That's an interesting idea.
Do that, and there's certain. I remember the Universal City Walk in California, and I don't know what it's like right now. I don't go there that often, but there was a period where you pay $5 for parking, and if you buy a movie ticket, you get your money back. I remember once I was there for a work event, and this was 16, 17 years ago. And I went to the movies for something I otherwise wasn't going to see at that time because, hey, I've already paid $5 for parking. I'm here for a couple hours anyway. I might as well get 5 of that back and get a movie ticket.
I'm recently an A-list AMC member. So my first movie was this weekend. I went to the movies. So I didn't feel as guilty. I bought a small popcorn for myself and a candy because the ticket was so cheap. Or the ticket was free, essentially.
Yes. What did you see, if I may ask?
I did see Elvis finally, late to the party.
Oh,
Yes, late.
what'd you think?
I loved it. I mean, it was. We talked about this earlier, but Elvis is nostalgia for a lot of people, especially the older crowd because they grew up with that music. But I grew up with that music too, listening to it with my grandpa every weekend on the way to breakfast. So it was a good time for me at the movies.
Yeah, I mean it's a big movie. It plays like a theatrical musical event, but and this shouldn't be a surprise considering Baz Luhrmann's filmography, but it's certainly not nostalgic in terms of how his career played out,
Yeah, yeah.
which is why I'm oddly refreshed that it's been as leggy as it has. The film has made $281 million on an $85 million budget, made 149 world or domestic, despite being on PVOD for the last several weeks and despite being on HBO Max as of this past Friday. The film is globally the biggest musical biopic of all time behind Bohemian Rhapsody, which was a bonkers lightning in a bottle movie that made 905 million worldwide 4 years ago. Um, so yeah, and again, one anecdotal piece of evidence isn't necessarily a theory, but I've always believed that if theaters are basically buildings that sell you concessions and the movies are what get you in the door, then there needs to be some kind of conversation about how to make people more likely to show up to buy that popcorn.
I
And
like
even
your
if that's
idea.
basically giving the movie away for free, relatively speaking. Because I remember one of my college, when I took a college class on TV in well, 20 some years ago, the professor opened up the lecture with basically saying television is basically selling us. We are the product. The people that watch the television show are the product for the benefit of those who would pay money to advertise.
Mhm.
So it's a strange symbiotic relationship that's not as simple as the product is the TV show that we now watch. And that's part of why the streaming era has been so skewed, because it changed the formula. There is no advertising, or there's very little advertising in most streaming content. So the nature of what is a success, what is not a success, is completely out of whack.
Of course. So I do want to get back to Spider-Man: No Way Home and it being re-released this weekend. So do you think that studios will be more tempted based on the success that it saw this weekend to re-release more movies, especially in a tighter window like the 8 months we saw with this film?
That is a good question that I don't know the answer to. But I think if Avatar comes out in 2 weeks and kicks righteous ass in theaters, then I think that's going to be something we're going to see a little bit of. Obviously, we saw a ton of re-releases last in 2020 because theaters were open, but without any new big movies to show. Um, Ironically, the biggest grossing movie of that period was Hocus Pocus, which made $4.8 million in the summer of 2020.
And is that why there's Hocus Pocus 2? Because it still was
That's always been
successful?
in development. That was always going to be a Disney Plus feature. Um, because you're banking on nostalgia, and because it's at home, you don't have to go to the movies and buy a ticket and pay for parking. And obviously, I don't think you need a babysitter. I'm guessing Hocus Pocus 2 is not hardcore. Although if it is, I'm more interested. If they go, if there's lots of, gore and nudity and carnage, like, okay, fine, whatever. But jokes aside, I mean, that's a film that, if we argue that something in theaters is more valuable to streaming than something that's just streaming, there's a case to be made on spending a few bucks and releasing Hocus Pocus 2 in theaters and letting the chips fall where they may.
We talked about that last time. I still think it's a good idea, but doesn't look like it's happening.
No, it's way too late. I mean, that's a good example, but the chip, the die has been cast. And again, I am not privy to every dollar that would need to be spent in terms of marketing a theatrical release. It's very expensive. That's the biggest obstacle for theaters not releasing more, medium size slash mid-budget studio programmers in theaters, because even if the movie can be brought in on a regional budget, it's very expensive to market these films for theaters.
And do audiences have more of a appetite for these re-releases because there's nothing, or there's not as much new content? Okay.
I mean, that may be a simplistic conclusion, but I don't think you're wrong, because if there are people that like going to the movies just to go to the movies, and I think that audience is uniquely positioned to want to see an old movie on a big screen again. Um, and again, I think if Avatar does very well this month, and I think Titanic is coming out this Valentine's Day, um, just for the hell of it, frankly, as far as I know, it'll be 25 years. It opened 25 years in December this year, so it'll be 25 years since it just crushed the first 3 months of 1998. Steamrolling everything in its path for the first 15 weekends. Um, rest in peace, Deep Rising, Twilight, not that Twilight, The Replacement Killers, Dark City, Wild Things. Um, yeah.
Twilight beat Titanic?
No, not that. I apologize. Not that Twilight. It's a film noir with Paul Newman, Susan Sarandon.
Oh, okay. I had to catch my breath for a second.
No, that's okay. Good movie if you're so inclined, but it's not appointment viewing. Again, when people went to the movies just to go to the movies, blah blah blah. But the funny thing is, if I might digress for a second,
Of course.
one of the only films that came close to dethroning Titanic in its 15-week reign at the top was The Man in the Iron Mask, which was the first big Leonardo DiCaprio film to come out after Titanic.
Yes.
And we saw kind of a repeat of that this year, where what was the one big movie that actually did really well in early 2022 after Spider-Man No Way Home? It was Tom Holland's Uncharted. And I think that's partially why Sony moved Morbius from late January to early April, because they wanted their next big movie to also be a Tom Holland picture.
Scott, it's like you read my mind, because I did want to talk about Titanic's release specifically. So we'll just get right to it next since we're already here. So Titanic had crazy press leading up to the release. Everyone thought it was going to be a flop. You just said it was spent 15 weeks top of the box office. It's still considered one of the best movies in modern times, at least to me. But of course, won a few Oscars. So very successful movie by all standards. And last week, or when we talked last, we talked about all the drama surrounding Don't Worry, Darling, and all of the bad press that's leading up to the film's release. Now, that was pre-Venice Film Festival, where everything really came to a head there. All the drama was on display, whether it be the pre-premiere presser, the red carpet, or even the standing ovation. People were critical of that. So you said before that you didn't think that this bad press would sink the film, but you still don't. Post all the viral moments coming out of Venice, you don't think it will sink it?
No, because if people want to see the film, they will see the film. And while the reviews aren't spectacular, they're still of the sense that if you want to go see this movie to watch Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, and Chris Pine and Olivia Wilde be, drop dead sexy in an old school erotic fantasy thriller, you get what you pay for in that sense. I saw the film yesterday.
So what did you think? Tell us.
Liked it. I think it's a solid 3-star picture that in a sane world before Hollywood got swallowed up by IP tentpole franchise fever, and before every piece of entertainment got caught in the mostly online culture war, it would be just a good movie. A solid R-rated, adult skewing, star-driven, original studio programmer that's just Saturday night at the movies. I don't think any of the will it win Oscars or not talk is fair. It was never going to be an Oscar picture. I mean, Gone Girl was the buzzy pop culture icon movie of late 2014, and that didn't even get a Best Picture nomination. I think it deserved one, but that's another conversation. So this would be like, varying quality notwithstanding, A Simple Favor or The Girl in the Window getting a Best Picture nomination. I'm sorry, A Girl on the Train. I like Simple Favor quite a bit, but it's not that kind of movie. Um, and I think Florence Pugh is very good in it. She's in almost every frame. Olivia Wilde directs the hell out of the picture. I think if nothing else, it's sort of a look what I can do filmmaker flex.
Do you think she will get a Best Director nod?
Oh no, not at all. And again, I don't think this film is an Oscar picture at all, but I think it shouldn't have to be. I think Wilde requested the festival debut because she wanted that feather in her cap. And whatever my feelings are about the film opening in late September because of that versus, say, this weekend, when those deals were made, Salem's Lot was supposed to come out this weekend. So it would have made sense for New Line's Salem Lot to open in the post-Labor Day horror slot that Warner Brothers has cultivated. And then 2 weeks later, they'd open up their big, splashy, adult-skewing, babysitter picture. What I like to, that's my term, which means it's worth a babysitter.
So do you think that Don't Worry Darling will pull a Titanic, break through this bad press, spend 15 weeks at the top of the box office, or will it just kind of be a middle of the road?
I think somewhere in between there. Look, Titanic is Titanic. That was,
Of course.
I don't think any movie will ever sell as many tickets domestically or worldwide ever again than Titanic did.
I think I saw a statistic yesterday that 7% of all American girls at the time saw Titanic twice.
Only 7%?
Like in theaters.
No, I just, yeah, that tracks. But you know what? While girls seeing that film over and over again because it was a very good romantic melodrama and because Leonardo DiCaprio was a fox, that was by that many, I mean he's very sexy, not that he was starring in a Fox picture.
Yeah.
I know. Yes, that was a driving motivator for its repeat business, but you don't get the 600 million just on teenage girls. And just in the same way that, if you're a Transformers movie, you don't get the 400 million just on teenage boys. And I think there is anyway, I'm getting off track. Point being, no, I don't think Don't Worry Darling is going to do infinity and beyond business. I think it'll do solid mid-level studio programmer numbers. The girl on the train with Emily Blunt did about 75 domestic and 173 worldwide in 2016 with similar mixed reviews. And frankly, this one's a more polished, pulpy, splashy, fantastical picture anyway. A Simple Favor with Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively. That one earned approximately 53 million domestic and I think about 98 worldwide on a 20 budget in 2018. I think somewhere in that zone is basically what we're going to see for this picture. And it costs between 20 and 30 million, give or take COVID expenses. That will be fine.
Mm-hmm. And what examples are there of movies that had bad press leading up to the release and then they kind of fulfilled that prophecy and flopped at the box office?
Less than you'd think. And 9 times out of 10, it's because the film just wasn't that commercial anyway. The one example that people like to throw out, not incorrectly, because I understand, is Josh Trank's Fantastic Four. That was a film that was bedeviled by well over a year of behind the scenes melodrama that was mostly reported on geek sites and on social media. The film was heavily recut, reshot, re-edited. And then about a week before the film came out, Josh Trank himself basically trashed the theatrical cut on Twitter, which is not par for the course.
That's is that unprecedented?
I probably, just because, social media hasn't been around forever.
Yeah.
So I would say probably. But, he's not the first person to try, Bill Cosby, off-screen crimes notwithstanding, when Leonard Part 6 came out in, I believe, 1986, it was such a bad film that he tried to buy it back from the studio. And then when they refused to sell it to him, he basically went out in the media and told people, this is a bad movie, please don't see it.
Interesting. What was coming to mind for me was Gigli, the Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez, 2003.
That was also a time during which Ben Affleck wasn't as much of a butts in seats movie star as we like to think, even then. Phantoms was not a smash. And even Matt Damon, the Bourne Identity basically saved his career after a handful of post Goodwill Hunting flops. He'll admit that his phone was barely ringing until the Bourne Identity, which was beset by months of bad press and rumors of, behind the scenes shenanigans, by the way. They reshot the ending. Doug Liman and Frank Marshall, producer, allegedly did not get along. That was a film that was tagged as problematic, but it got good reviews, opened with 27 million, legged out to 127 domestic, I think 212 worldwide, but don't quote me on that. And it became the most rented title of 2002. So in that case, because the movie delivered, the bad press was irrelevant. World War Z is another good example. I think I discussed that last week, so I apologize. But that was another film that was beset by bad press, budget overruns, rumors and rumblings of talent not getting along with each other, a massively reshot third act. But to the general audience, was this a big budget zombie action movie based on a book that I've heard of and possibly read that also stars Brad Pitt in classic movie star mode? Yes. So the film opened with $66 million, legged out to 200 domestic, and earned 550 worldwide on a 190 budget. So if the movie delivers on whatever it's promising, and if it's something that people want to see anyway, then the bad press, it might not help, but it usually doesn't hurt. Fantastic Four, if you remove the whole comic book movies are great, everybody loves comic movies or whatever, people had already seen two Fantastic Four movies in 2005 and 2007. They were not terribly well received, but they were relatively successful. Tim Story's Fantastic Four made 330 on a 100 budget. Rise of the Silver Surfer made 300 million on a 150 budget, give or take, or 130, excuse me. They weren't terribly well received, but most people have gotten their fill on Fantastic Four movies. Fox comes out with this reboot. It's darker, it's grittier, it's so violent you can't take your kids to it. And it stars such non-stars as Miles Teller, Kate Mara, at that time Michael B. Jordan, who was, we like him, but he's not an opener. Toby Kebbell as Dr. Doom. Jamie Bell. These are all people that if you follow the industry, you know who they are, but they're not asses in seats draws. And the film got terrible reviews. So the question is, what is this film offering to you if you don't automatically care about a star-free, grimdark Fantastic Four origin story? And because the answer was nothing, then nobody showed up, comparatively speaking, because the audience and the interest among general audiences in what that film was offering was low.
But from what you're saying, it sounds like Don't Worry, Darling has something to offer the audience.
An ensemble cast of well-known and well-liked stars, and I'm not saying they're necessarily by themselves butts in seats draws. I mean, Chris Pine, good actor, nice guy, can't open an envelope outside of Star Trek. It's got something of a marquee director in Olivia Wilde. We've heard of her. She's been around for a decade or so. A lot of us watched House 10 years ago. It has the appeal of being a sexy R-rated erotic fantasy thriller for adults that, earns its R rating, and spoiler, there is sex. Although no nudity unless I missed something. Anyway, and the reviews aren't great, which might be a problem. But again, I would argue even the pans are saying, look, whether or not I like this movie, it delivers on what it's marketing. And that to me is more important in terms of do reviews affect box office or not than whether the thumb is up or down.
Scott, before I let you go, I do need to ask you, do you think Harry Styles spat on Chris Pine at the Venice Film Festival?
I am reasonably sure that the lead singer of One Direction did not intentionally spit on the star of Star Trek, Hell or High Water, or Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit. Is it possible that he was saying hello and some drool came out of his mouth? Maybe, I guess, whatever. But Harry Styles has been in this game for a long time. He knows how to behave himself in public. I can't imagine what Chris Pine might have done or said to him on set or off set. And they don't have a ton of screen time together in this film. And that's just the way of the movie. That makes sense. To make him so mad at him that he would spit on Chris Pine.
When all eyes were on them too.
Yeah, and when all eyes were on him. again, it's one of those things that like the video's funny to watch, and I can kind of see that, yeah, if you go into that with the bias, if something actually happens, you can, the evidence fits your rumor. But come on.
Yeah, the internet chat is funny though. I will give it that.
Funny.
Oh yeah. I'm very amused by the cheap jokes referencing Oliver Stone's JFK, et cetera, et cetera. But no, I do not think Harry Styles intentionally spit on Chris Pine with malice and forethought.
Well, there we have it. Scott Mendelson, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's lovely being here.